Most people know the story of Cain and Abel, the murder, the exile, the curse. But there is a moment in this story almost no one talks about. It is a quiet moment that changes everything about their tragic history. God warned Cain before he ever raised his hand against his brother. He gave him a direct, clear chance to turn back from darkness. The Creator spoke to his heart, urging him to master his rising anger. Yet, Cain stood at the crossroads of his own soul and hesitated. The weight of his jealousy pressed down, heavy and cold as stone. He looked at Abel, then back at the path of righteousness ahead. In that final, silent second, Cain chose the path of murder anyway. The opportunity for redemption vanished, replaced by a legacy of deep sorrow. His choice defined not just his life, but the history of humanity.
Like the video and let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
The gates of Eden slammed shut behind them. The cherubim's sword flashed once, and the garden they had walked in for years was gone. Adam stepped first onto the rocky soil outside, then reached back for Eve. They walked out together into a world that had never known human footprints before. They carried only memories, days where fruit hung ripe on branches without effort, evenings when God walked beside them through the cool air. No hunger, no ache, no weight of toil. Eve reached up one afternoon to pull fruit from a gnarled tree, and her hand closed around thorns instead of figs. The blood beaded on her palm, and she understood the new order of things. Every mouthful of bread would require hours of bending and digging. Every step would require grit they had never needed before. The ground sprouted thorns instead of figs, drought instead of steady rain, and every harvest had to be torn from resistant soil by brute force. Eve did not break. She clung to the promise God had spoken after the serpent tricked them. Her child would one day crush the serpent's head, undo the wrong that cast them out. When the first quickening stirred inside her belly, that promise bloomed into bright, sharp hope. For the first time since they left the garden, she could see a future beyond the ache of each day. She carried that hope, heavy and warm, as she and Adam cleared the first brush, dug the first rose, and built the first human home outside the gate that would never open for them again. Cain drew his first breath in that hard new world, and Eve named him Acquired. She had brought forth a man with the Lord's help, and all her expectations settled on him from his first cry. Years later, Abel came next, his name meaning vapor, a faint, fleeting thing the world had not yet shaped. The two boys grew running through the unmarked hills outside their parents' camp. They learned to strike fire from flint until their knuckles bled. They learned which berries stained your fingers purple and which burned your throat so bad you could not drink for a day. They learned to call on God when storms rolled down from the mountains, when the wind howled so loud it threatened to tear their shelters loose. Every task they did was the first of its kind in human history. When they reached adulthood, the hay path split clean down the middle. Cain took after his father. He became a farmer. He cleared brush with a stone axe until his shoulders ached so bad he could not sleep at night. He broke soil full of stones, one shovelful at a time, and planted grain seeds by hand, pressing each one into the cold earth. He carried Eve's old promise like a stone in his pocket. He was stubborn, proud, relentless. He fought the land every season. He yanked thorns out by the root, dug ditches by hand to hold rain during drought, forced the resistant soil to give him what he demanded. Abel walked a different road. He became a shepherd, leading his flock from one green grazing patch to the next. His work did not require fighting. It required stopping, listening, leaning in. Following the custom their parents had taught them, both brothers decided to bring an offering to God. It was no empty ritual. It was their way to say thank you, to admit every bite of food they ate depended on the Creator who had shaped this new world. Abel went first, down to the fold where his sheep grazed on the side of the hill. He walked between the lambs, scanning each one, and stopped at the strongest firstborn of his best ewe. This lamb had grown fat and healthy on the sweetest grass. It was the best animal in his entire flock. He did not hesitate. He did not hold back. He cut the fattest, finest portion, wrapped it in clean cloth, and carried it up to the place of offering. He gave the very best he had, out of trust that God had given him everything. Cain followed behind him, walking out to his own fields. He had fine produce growing there, plump golden grain, ripe gourds that weighed heavy in the hand, deep purple grapes that burst with sweetness when you bit into them. He stepped past the best rows, the ones he had tended through weeks of drought, and pulled what was closest to the edge of his field. He filled a woven basket with mixed produce, bits and pieces that were easy to gather, that he could easily spare without giving up the best of his harvest. He did not think about intent. He did not think about reverence. He just brought what was convenient, checked the box of the custom, and carried the basket up to join his brother. God's favor settled on Abel's offering first. A thin wisp of smoke curled up from the altar, clear and sweet, the sign of acceptance that their parents had taught them to recognize. When God turned to Cain's basket, the smoke did not rise. The sign did not come. The stone altar stayed cold. Cain's shoulders slumped forward. His face burned hot enough he thought the skin would crack. He had worked his hands raw that season. He had broken rocks, pulled thorns, dug ditches in the dust. When the sun blazed so hot, it burned the skin off his neck. He had brought something of value. Why his brother, and not him? The humiliation burned in his throat, thick and bitter, and curdled into something sharp and hot. Rage bloomed in his chest, slow and heavy, pushing out every other thought. God saw the rage building. He did not turn away. He did not strike first. He spoke to Cain, soft but firm, a warning before the break. He asked why Cain was angry, why his face had fallen so low. Then he spoke the words that have echoed through every generation since. If you do well, will you not be accepted? If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. It was no condemnation. It was a last chance. Sin waited just outside Cain's control, a hungry lion hidden in the tall grass, ready to leap the second he let his guard drop. All he had to do was stop. All he had to do was humble himself, reach out, master the rage before it mastered him. Cain stood still on the stone, his hands curled into fists at his sides. He did not speak. He did not bow his head. He just held the rage tight and let it grow. Days stretched on, and the tension hung thick between the brothers. They still ate bread at the common fire. They still passed water skins when the sun burned high. But Cain never spoke of what burned behind his eyes. He never looked Abel directly in the face. The rage did not fade. It settled deeper into his bones, into every breath he drew. He did not master it. He fed it. One morning, as the sun cleared the ridge and cast long shadows across the hills, Cain turned to his brother. His voice was light, casual, no trace of the poison that had eaten through his heart. He said, "Let's walk out to the far field. The barley is coming up there. I want to show you how much it's grown." Abel had never doubted his older brother. He had no reason to. They had walked these hills together since they were small boys, chasing goats and racing down slopes. He trusted Cain completely. He grabbed his walking staff and stood. He said, "Of course, lead the way." They walked for an hour, past the cleared fields, past the sheepfold, past the ridge that blocked the camp from view. Wind whispers, boots creak, Cain halts, Abel smiles. Stone fell, Abel fell, face first. Cain stood, chest heaving. Worlds spun on. He did not yell. He did not fall to his knees. He just stood and let the dust settle on the dirt that held his brother's blood. Then he heard the voice. It did not boom from the sky. It did not shake the ground under his feet. It was the same voice that had walked with Adam and Eve in the cool of the evening. It asked a simple question, an invitation to confess, to turn back before the final line was crossed. "Where is Abel, your brother?" Cain's hand tightened on the stone. He shifted his weight. He shrugged and spoke the first great lie of human history, the words that have excused every broken bond since that day. "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" He denied the blood tie. He rejected every responsibility. He put his own pride above the life of the only brother he had ever had. God's answer was heavy with sorrow, not rage. He told Cain that Abel's blood cried out to him from the ground. The earth itself had drunk the blood, and it would not be silent. The crime could not be hidden. Then he spoke the judgment. The soil that Cain had fought so hard to tame would no longer yield to his hands. It would turn hard and resistant, no matter how much he dug or how much he planted. Cain would become a wanderer, moving from place to place for the rest of his life. He would never settle. He would never rest. He would never know the security of a home he could call his own. Cain cried out then, the first sound he had made since the killing. He said the punishment was too heavy. Cain turned away from God's presence and from the camp that had been his home since birth. He walked east, boots crunching over loose rock and dry grass. Every step took him further from the fields where he and Abel had worked side by side, further from the fire where they had eaten bread together, further from the parents who already mourned the son he had killed. The land of Nod stretched out before him, wild and unmarked. No cleared fields, no marked paths, no familiar hills to guide his way. Rocky slopes rolled for miles, broken only by dry riverbeds and scattered patches of sparse grass. The sky hung big and empty above his head, a constant reminder of how completely alone he was. He wandered for weeks, learning to survive on what the untamed land would give him. He drank cold water from trickling streams hidden in deep ravines. He foraged wild berries and dug tough roots from the cracked soil. He caught small game with traps he wove from branches, skinned it with his stone knife, and cooked it over small fires he built at dusk. He slept under the open sky, listening to nocturnal animals move through the brush around his camp. The hot, burning rage that had driven him to strike was long gone. In its place grew a cold, gnawing regret that never let him rest. He replayed that morning in the far field, over and over, every step, every word, the weight of the stone in his hand. The camp's people tensed when they saw him, hands moving to their own weapons. But they saw the mark Cain carried, and they lowered their guard. They recognized it as something holy, something to respect. A woman named Awan stepped forward, her eyes curious but not afraid. She did not flinch when Cain told her everything, the killing, the judgment, the exile that followed. She listened and saw he was broken, but still wanted to live. Over time, she chose to stay with him. They made their promise to each other. No grand feast, no ceremony. Cain cleared ground, cut stone, and built the first city in Nod, naming it for his firstborn son, Enoch. He stopped running. The mark never faded. The memory of Abel never left. But this was his, an imperfect home built from grace and survival. He chose to live.
If the Bible in video form helps you grow, tap subscribe and join us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.